I'm Julie Barkey with this Senate update. Should Minnesota students be required to be more active while in school? Senator Susan Kent introduced legislation on Thursday to the Senate Education Committee that would indeed require school districts to increase the amount of participation in Phy-Ed classes. Her idea generated some debate, and here is some of that testimony.
I'm here this morning to introduce Senate File 343, which is a bill aimed at updating physical education in Minnesota schools. This will help our kids be more active and healthier in the short term, as well as develop lifelong knowledge and skills for long-term health and wellness. Oh, and in the meantime, these efforts will help with learning. I think we've seen a lot of interesting data. I know just within the reports that we've seen, this just barely scratches the surface, and we're all sort of intrigued and trying to dive more deeply into some of the underlying issues and questions, and we'll hear more testimony along those lines that hopefully help. This is obviously a much bigger and complex question, but we think this is one very significant way that will help kids at the time that they're having the physical education, but also in terms of preparing them for longer term wellness. It's worth noting that this bill is a natural next step in a process that was begun in the legislature several years ago. In 2010, the Minnesota legislature passed and Governor Pawlenty signed into law a requirement that all school districts include a PE minimum standards component in their curriculum. Members of the Minnesotans for Healthy Kids Coalition advocated for this change to help address the rising obesity epidemic in our state and across the country, as well as in response to the overwhelming evidence of significant benefits of a comprehensive physical education curriculum. Higher test scores, fewer disciplinary issues, healthier kids.
A significant portion of a child's typical weekday is spent in school. Studies that objectively measure physical activity show that students are generally sedentary during the school day, and that the activity they do accumulate occurs through transitioning to and from school, during physical education courses, in interscholastic and intramural sports, and during recess. How the school day is structured by adults has an important influence on the overall amount of physical activity students achieve. Schools are a setting where we can have the greatest impact promoting physical activity for young people. The standards to which schools are held are critically important to ensure that we achieve that impact. In my research with Project Scope, the school obesity policy evaluation based at the University of Minnesota, we have found that the need for promoting physical activity has become greater in Minnesota schools, particularly in schools that serve economically disadvantaged populations and schools in rural areas of our state.
Obesity and overweight are increasingly a peril to our health and economic stability. A growing body of research suggests that obesity is largely to blame for our ballooning healthcare costs. Right now, 75% of all healthcare costs are spent on the treatment of chronic diseases, many of which are obesity-related. These villains also have been shown to be a prime enemy of learning and academic performance. Research has shown a direct negative relationship between overweight and test scores, attendance, and behavior. At the root of this is the decline of PE and the physical activity, or PA, that it provides, and this is particularly true in populations where the achievement gap is the greatest. In a recent paper, researchers at Columbia University concluded, and I quote, "Physical inactivity is highly and disproportionately prevalent among school-aged urban minority youth and has a negative impact on academic achievement through its effects on cognition. The population segments of youth with the lowest levels of physical activity and fitness also have the least access to school-based physical activity opportunities and resources," end quote.
You know, we're looking for not one-size-fits-all legislation coming from you folks this year, or any year, quite frankly. And certainly not more testing either. And if you get into Section 5, when we're talking about adding more testing and assessments, that's going to be more problematic too for districts. What we really need from you is to help us find more time. School's getting out at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. If I could leave this building at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, I could get to the YMCA and get my workout in, but I can't do that. And the same thing is happening too, I think, with the academic day and the calendar. And I think, Senator Pratt, you alluded to it a little bit as well. You know, what's happening in suburbia or even in rural areas, and what's happening in those after-school hours. I think if you can help us not with trying to put more constraints on the existing academic day, but help us build out some more time after school to give these low-income kids, especially who are really struggling, give them more opportunities to be engaged in some positive activities. I think that's going to go a long way to addressing a lot of the underlying issues that are involved in that student survey.
I just want to preface my question by saying that I don't think, I certainly don't disagree, and I doubt that there's anyone here that disagrees with the importance of physical education and what have you. You know, but as we look, and I know that there has certainly been a diminishment of the time spent in our school day for that purpose. But I think if you were to go back and check with our school districts, the reason for that diminishment have been, quite frankly, the requirements that have been placed on our school districts by the Department of Education with the blessings and authorization of this legislature. And so my question is, what are we going to waive in order to allow these to take place? Because as a legislator, and knowing the temperament of my schools and the problems of my schools, and having talked about the administration's budget yesterday with that includes no money for many of the basic issues that are problems in our districts, I will never vote for this without at least some type of a waiver for them, or allow some flexibility for them to accommodate this.
We know and we can tell when there's an issue, but even as a parent, I didn't know till 3rd grade. If we had some of that training and some stronger emphasis on some of this stuff at the elementary level in the physical education area, including adding that teacher as part of the parent-teacher conference so that we can understand what the wellness is of that child, the whole wellness. They also have anxiety issues. So my concern with running the mile created anxiety in my child. But if we can take a look at this from a standards perspective and make sure that we can come back and say, is this working? Is it not working? What we're doing right now is really nothing. We let them, they give them the physical education class. The most important thing about this bill that I think people should take a look at is using recess as a punishment for behavioral issues, especially with a child that has some kind of disability and is trying their best just to get through the day and then have to face some kind of anxiety because they can't participate even in recess. So I am very supportive of what you're trying to do, and I hear some concerns. Mostly it sounds like the secondary level. I would maybe suggest that we look at talking about at the elementary level when some of these indicators can even be found and can help with future things that these children are faced with.
What barriers do you face in not having a longer day?
Mr. Walseth.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Bonoff and members, there are a lot of barriers, you know, and when you get into deeper rural communities, just having, you know, great organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs out there to help provide some of those after-school programs. We'll find those in larger regional centers, but getting a lot of that quality programming out to deeper rural areas can be difficult. And then it's, you know, I hate to say it, but it's dollars, buying time, buying staff time, buying the time of quality adults who are great assets for kids. And we need resources. We've so focused the educational dollars on that academic calendar, and as Senator Weber talked about all the exact things that you have to do with all the standards and different courses we have to take. We'd like you to review all the standards and courses that are required in high school and maybe free up some of those requirements to let kids explore and do some different things. So I think we've gone through a decade or more here in education of really focusing on high academic rigor, lots of math, lots of science at the loss of everything else. I think it's time for our society to start taking a look at that and realize there are a lot of other things we need to be doing for kids to keep them engaged.
Physical education is not necessarily physical activity. And a lot of the benefits we've talked about here have come through physical activity, and they are not the same. And so I'm concerned about that. I took a quick look to check on the standards that we're looking at doing here, national, federal standards. I have a concern about that in general, but I could not find them. And not only that, the one place where I did find them, I had to purchase a book in order to find out what it was. So I don't like voting about something that I don't know what's really being required here, and especially when it's a federal thing. So maybe there's something, I just did a quick Google while I'm in committee, so that isn't a real in-depth search at all. And then the other thing is But the other question is about sports, because I think when you talk about physical activity, and I'm concerned to make sure that we take a look at this. So if they're in an after-school sport, which certainly is physical activity, will that be able to be included in meeting this standard? Because I think it should be. I think it certainly meets the spirit of that. I think that's something that I think is really important. And I am sensitive. I know my school districts putting any more mandates, any more record keeping, any more of these kinds of things. They have had it. They want no more.
These programs are designed to get kids moving. It's designed to teach them lifelong fitness and activity skills so they can take them with them. I'm reading from the high school outcomes, which is page 33 in the benchmarks. It says by the end of high school, the learners will be college career ready. We use that term here, as demonstrated by the ability to plan and implement different types of personal fitness programs. Demonstrate competency in 2 or more lifetime activities. Really, how many of us are still playing volleyball at this stage in our lives after we did it so many times in school, right? And so it's helping kids have independent information that when they go to college or whatever they're going to do in their post-secondary career, that they have the information that they can independently take care of this important aspect of their lives as well. So it is exactly what you're talking about. It's keeping them moving during the day in a more meaningful way, and it's giving them true physical education, information they can take with them.
Both my parents were PE teachers, and for fun at our house, my dad would put on Go You Chicken Fat Go record, and that's what we would do. You can still find it on YouTube. I go over to my dad's house and we still do Go You Chicken Fat Go. PE is, for my 4 children, one of them, PE was where he actually built his confidence. So when he was a wild child too. And so when he would, his punishment was to be pulled from PE, because that's what would work with Mr. Owsley. It would ruin his whole day. So it really, really is an important part of the curriculum. But I do, and I appreciate the willingness to work with the testifiers at the table. The one daughter that I have right now is in PSEO and does 30 hours a week of competitive dance. So she doesn't do her PE in school. So if you're willing to work with that, I think that would help a lot.
And I think, all of us are working at this world-class workforce, and I see this as one element that, along with the other many non-academic barriers that we're looking at. I put it in that category, and it is something that I think will bring us to in the future, it will pay back greatly as we get our kids who are ready for PSEO and post-secondary education or career. We will benefit as a state. So thank you very much.